All right, we're running.
We what?
I say it's running. It's recording, so we're good.
We're recording this? How exciting for me.
It'll be up on our. It'll be on our website by tomorrow.
Could we hand out your handout at our last meeting?
Oh, sure. I don't. It's yours. It's not. There's nothing proprietary about it. Feel free. So you were asking about your loss group. When does it meet?
It meets on Monday, one Monday evening a month.
Do you meet before Christmas?
We have a December 10th, but she said that's too early for you.
That might be challenging.
In January,
because I teach already all day on Mondays.
So this is half of our.
Your two of you are half.
No, there's more.
But you're welcome to use the handout for sure. And maybe you'll take away something from our conversation today that you can use.
And maybe we could have you visit sometime during the year because I don't know.
That'd be fine. That'd be fine. I'll give you my card as we're done. It's quarter after. Would you like me to get started?
Yes, yes.
So that be respectful of all of your time.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Oh, you're going? Okay.
I'll bet some of you will remember this lady. She came in last year and gave us this totally charming and off-the-wall talk on hoarding. Remember that?
What?
Hoarding.
H-O-R.
We spoke about hoarding last year.
We often do, but don't admit to. No, a number of people actually came forward and said, I got to admit it, I do it. She was one who gave us a nice talk on that last time. And if you want to know anything about it, give her a call. She is a social worker with an MSW degree from UM. Spent a lot of time in a variety of different jobs related to that. But she also is a professor part-time over at WEME. And so she knows a little bit about watching and stuff like that as well. So we had a very, very good time with her last time. And I'm looking forward to hearing this. We're all going to be so sad over Thanksgiving, so we got to get some posters.
No, you're not going to be sad. Thank you, Peter. So as you said, I'm Diane Fenske. I happen to be a social worker, and I do a fair amount of community presentations on a variety of topics, and I've worked at, this is the third time I've been invited to your church, and I'm happy to be here. So I used to call this talk, when I first did this talk a couple years ago, or something similar to it, it's been tweaked numerous times, I called it, I'm sure some of you remember that old Andy Williams song that was, it's the most wonderful time of the year. Yeah, a lot of heads on you remember that. And that song always made me a little nuts because I thought, it's not the most wonderful time of the year for everybody. It is for a lot of people. So I felt like I had entitled this that, and then I thought, well, that seems a little harsh. So I backed it off to thinking about holiday cheer. I'm just not feeling it because everybody doesn't approach the winter holidays in the same way, with the same joy and excitement that everyone else does. So I sometimes have always felt like if I wasn't having a year where I wanted to be all happy and gay and thinking it was the most wonderful time, I felt like a left foot out there or a third wheel somewhere because I didn't feel the same way everybody else did. And then I started to find out there were more and more people who thought, yeah, I enjoy this, but it doesn't make me want to be outside running around and enjoying the holidays like some people do. So that's kind of where this all got started from. When I was 26, my mom died 2 days before Christmas, or 3 days before Christmas, and then her funeral was on December 24th. So that was kind of a huge turning point for me in seeing that, you know, everybody else was running around on December 24th getting ready for their Christmas Eve dinners and parties and church and Christmas pageants and everything, and I was standing in a cemetery. And that was very, very, very eye-opening, and I can't even tell you the right adjectives to describe what it did for me, to me. But over the years, I've come to recognize I'm not the only person that has those kinds of things. So that's why I'm happy to come and talk on this topic today. So there are a bunch of truths and myths, I'm going to move over to this side, about the winter holidays. And here's a few of them as we see them. So even at the best of times, in the best of years, the winter holidays can be stressful for so many reasons. You know, We all know what the things are and how commercialized Christmas has become, and good grief, it was 80 degrees outside when I saw that they were putting out Halloween and some Christmas decorations. And so we start getting bombarded with this idea of the holidays coming very early in the year now. And in fact, I think it's getting earlier and earlier, don't you? It just seems to be there like immediately. Like we go from Halloween starts showing up in August and September, and then Christmas cards and things start loading in right after that. So even at the best of times, the holidays are stressful because we're busy, because there's a lot of expectations that we place on ourselves and that people place on us. And so the expectation is out there that we should feel happy. We should be joyous and be happy. And you can't not watch television and get that idea. For instance, how many of you have watched, probably not the gentleman in the room, but there's the Hallmark Channel. And watch something sometimes too, but they start talking about, they start their Christmas programming already a couple days before Halloween even came. I looked to see, I knew I was going to do this talk, so I watched. October 27th, they started their Christmas programming. They do non-stop Christmas shows until January 2nd or something like that. So if that's something that if that's a channel you enjoyed watching in the past, but you didn't want to watch non-stop holiday cheer, what do? It changes things for you dramatically. So let's talk for a minute about what your reactions to the holidays are. I'm very participatory, so I hope that you will be too, because talking to myself isn't going to help. So I would appreciate if you join in and say, how many of you say you look forward to the holidays, the winter holidays? Okay, a goodly number of you. How many say that you tolerate the holidays? And I would put my hand up for that too. How many of you think that you dread the holidays? Sometimes, and I do in a way as well. And then some combination of the above. There's probably a number of us. Hi, come on in. Did you get a hand?
I did.
Good.
Thank you.
There's probably some people in this room who would say, okay, it's a love-hate relationship, you know. You start out with all good intentions, or for some people, they start to feel a little more jazzed up as you get closer and closer to Christmas. Thanksgiving is on a different note, because Thanksgiving's all about what? Food. And being together with people that you like, care about, love. And so it's not as threatening. Thanksgiving doesn't evoke the same feelings in us. Because even if you're not, hi, come on in. Even if you're not a big holiday person, the idea of Thanksgiving, you're so busy cooking and getting your table set and making sure everything comes out of the oven at the same time, and that you don't think of it as being as much of a stress on our psyche as the winter, as the Christmas and New Year's holidays are. So people tend to be dread, tolerate, and look forward to them. There's some combination of things that go on here. This is from a book that was written by Mary Oliver, from a book she wrote called Heavy, and it's a very good book. It talks about things that she's carried around with her, and she says, it's not the weight you carry, but how you carry it. Books, bricks, and grief. They're all heavy things in her mind. It's all in the way you embrace it, balance it, and carry it. And that has come to ring and resonate with me, the idea that everything, you have to find balance with everything you do. And you all know that. I'm preaching to the choir here by saying that you understand that you have to find balance in your life and the things that you do in order to get through them. And I have come to recognize that in myself and in people around me, that if I try to balance out the things that I like and don't like so much about the winter holidays, it just goes better for me. It goes better. So, no matter what holidays that you really enjoy, whether it's Thanksgiving or Christmas or New Year's or whatever really appeals to you, the idea out there, as I just mentioned on the Hallmark Channel, popular culture tells us that we're supposed to be joyous. We're supposed to be joyful. We're supposed to be happy. If you watch television, I mean, you can't even watch a Target ad without being told that you're supposed to be happy, happy, happy. Even the United States Postal Service ads have been cheerful this year, even though the United States Postal Service is nothing to be cheerful about. You're supposed to be cheery and warm. Is the Christmas holiday, or even the Thanksgiving holiday, what are some of the scenarios that you see on television or out in the store or in greeting cards and stuff? What are the things that tell you how you're supposed to feel warm and cheery?
Everyone's sitting around the fire.
Oh yeah, there's a fire. How many of you don't have a fireplace in your house? Okay, some of you. So sitting around the fire doesn't work at your house. So sitting around a fireplace. And another thing, sitting around, what else are we supposed to sit around? The table. Yeah, you're supposed to sit around the table and be cheerful. And in theory, that's good in theory, but in practice, how long does it take to eat your Thanksgiving dinner and move on? I know, it's all that work. I read something in Reader's Digest, I get Reader's Digest, and I read something in there saying it actually takes like 28.2 minutes or something to eat Thanksgiving dinner. And look how many hours you've spent putting that together. So you're supposed to sit around with your family around the table and have this warm, cheery dinner. Well, in theory, that's good, but in practice, people want to go watch a football game. They don't want to sit at the table anymore. The little kids can't sit, your grandkids can't sit still anymore, or your children. Hi, come on in. And it gets to be like everybody wants to get up and move around and do something. So that Hallmark picture that we get in our mind, that Currier and Ives sort of picture, doesn't work for us. So that's just another thing that says this isn't coming together. You're supposed to be surrounded by family and friends, according to, like you said, sitting around the table, family and friends. So what if you don't have a big family? What if you don't have a ton of friends that you spend holidays with? You know, your friends spend their time with their families, maybe. So then what are you supposed to do with the holiday? I don't know what any of you do, but like myself, I have developed friends who, over many years, who have become like family. And I'm sure some of you also have friends who you think of as being so close that they're your family. And you might turn to them at holidays, but if they have all their own things to do, then you might not see them. So that's like another little check mark that didn't quite work out the way Hallmark tells us it should. Popular culture tells us we're supposed to go out and decorate everything. How many of you have ever said, I'm just not up to it this year? Oh gosh, lots of hands. I was actually thinking this yesterday. I was thinking, you know, oh good, the deck is clear, the snow's all melted, it might be a good afternoon to run out and put up the Christmas lights. And then I thought, I don't want to. But does that make me a bad person? Because I don't want to put up the Christmas lights? No, it doesn't, but
you're saving energy.
Well, I'm saving energy, there you go. My neighbors actually always say something about my lights, but you're right, you're saving energy, but it says something about, someone could say to me, I wait for someone to say, how come you didn't put your Christmas lights up this year? You always have your lights up. Then it's another thing that makes you feel kind of bad. So then, and putting up a tree, there's always the tree thing. You know, sometimes you'd prefer to like hang a few bulbs on your giant fern. Maybe you don't want to put up a big tree. It's a lot of work to put up a tree. And for me, it's more work to take it down than it is to put it up. I'm always happier to put it up than I have to take it down. I see a lot of little smirks going on here, so you know what I'm talking about. What? Or it's shedding its needles. That's why I use a fake one now, so I have no needle drop. But how about this one? We're supposed to enjoy writing holiday cards and newsy letters. Oh, I see a lot of laughing going on. How many of you feel compelled to write a letter to put in your Christmas card, or it becomes your card? A lot of you. How many of you, and this is an informal survey I'm going to do, how many of you send Christmas cards? No judgment, just sending them. Why do you send Christmas cards?
To keep in touch with relatives that are far away.
Okay, so you think that your theory is if you send them a card, they'll send you one back, and then you'll hear what's going on in their family. Okay, that's one reason I send them too. Why else do you send Christmas cards to people? Why do you send Christmas cards?
Oh yeah, the people who receptive, people that I send would be upset if I didn't, I think. And I think that's true.
So you've started your own tradition, so to speak, and now you feel compelled to keep going, right? How many of you say that when you started sending Christmas cards, then you do it because you started it, so you have to keep doing it? That's why I do it.
Oh, and we want to say it's worse because I started a tradition years ago, when my husband was alive, sending out these big advent calendars to people along with a newsletter.
Wow.
And now, if they don't get it, I was just telling my friend, I get phone calls, I get emails, like, where's my calendar?
Are you all right? Why didn't you get a calendar? So you put yourself down the road all by yourself. You did that. My mother was an enormous card writer. My dad always said she should have owned stock in Hallmark when it was first getting going because she would have been rich. Because she loved to send greeting cards. So I learned that at home. You know, Christmas cards were fun for her. So I learned that, but now The worst time of the year for me as a lecturer at Eastern is Christmas, or the weeks leading up to it, because all I do is grade things night and day, night and day. It's grade-orama. And it's hard to figure out when to get the Christmas cards written unless I do them in October. But that doesn't feel right either, because things change between October and Christmas. So it's sort of a trap. But yet I buy the stamps, I bought the cards and everything, so now I have all that money invested. So now I feel like I have to send the cards. It's kind of this giant, it's kind of like a merry-go-round that keeps going around, and I just don't know how to get off. Culture also tells us we're supposed to honor the traditions of our families. Would somebody consider sharing a tradition that you've had with your family that you wouldn't mind letting go of? That you wouldn't mind if it just kind of went quietly away? Is there any tradition in your family that you think you're ready to part with? Yes.
It's not in my family, but in my neighborhood, one of the ladies started having all the neighbors put luminaries outside on Christmas Eve. And it's so much work, and Christmas Eve is so busy. And I told her last year, if I can't do it, I'm just not going to do it. She was very, very upset about that. But I mean, it looks pretty to have all the down the street.
Well, I bet it does.
Yeah, but it's just you just can't do everything in this life.
Okay, so that's a good example, and that wasn't even your tradition. Someone else started it, but you joined the crowd.
Right.
Okay, so that's a good thing. So you actually said you're not going to do it this year?
I haven't targeted this year, but last year I said no.
Well, I'm proud of you, Barbara, for saying that.
Say no again.
I'm proud of you for just saying no.
Say no again.
Plan to say no. Peter.
Can I just throw in something here?
Sure.
If we're going to consider this to be from Thanksgiving onward, anybody name me a brand new holiday that we have right after Thanksgiving that we didn't have when we were kids?
Black Friday.
There you go,
Black Friday, that has become like a holiday.
I was insisting with the party to start off with.
I think that Black Friday actually is getting more press than Thanksgiving this week and last week on the television. So that's popular culture too. And actually, you can buy things almost cheaper before it gets to be Black Friday now.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, that's a tradition. And you're right, it's a tradition for many people that the day after Thanksgiving, everybody gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning and goes shopping. Not my tradition, but it's for a lot of people. But for a lot of people, it's a family thing. You know, they go with their family. It's a bonding experience to go fight a crowd and spend time together. But that's a tradition. So I think you all, even if you didn't want to say it out loud, you all have a tradition that you would think to yourself, I wouldn't mind letting go of that somewhere. And the last thing, we're supposed to just suck it up and have a good time, even if we don't want to. And that, think about, do people think mostly that's true, even if you're having a challenging year, or you don't have as much money to spend on gifts, or whatever it is, or you're just pressed for time, or you just moved, or whatever it is, you're still supposed to just pull it together and do it, because everybody around us says it's the right thing to do, correct? So why are we just not feeling it, so to speak? Why isn't our holiday cheer the same? This is not, we're not talking about depression here today. I'm here to talk about organizing your thoughts and feelings going into the holiday season. So maybe you can think by the end about how you might do something a little differently that services you, that doesn't necessarily take care of everyone around you, but that takes care of you. That's our goal here today to talk about.
I just want to share it. Friends of ours send us a card, a letter at Pentecost instead of at Christmas. And I think that's so neat. I always know I'm going to hear from them, and I'm interested in knowing what's going on in their life, and they chose that. Take away the pressure.
Because that comes way after Christmas. That's a great idea. One year I got my Christmas cards out really late because I had moved into a new apartment when I was younger, and I had all my cards and stamps and everything. I thought, I'm not wasting that. So I made a decision to send out my Christmas cards for Valentine's Day, and I did. And people went, wow, that is a hoot. And they said it was like a combination of, hope you had a nice Christmas and good luck next year. But I did. I sent them all out like a week before Valentine's Day, and everybody thought it was a big hoot. So you could change it, but I like the Pentecost thing. So why aren't we just feeling it? There's a lot of reasons why things just don't resonate with us the same way. And it could be that there's an illness. There could be an illness in your family. It could be something serious going on that's taken a lot of your energy, or a lot of your time, or maybe your finances, or maybe you're not feeling well. Maybe there's something going on with you and you think, this is just not working for me. So there's opportunity. Illness sometimes rears its ugly head. Sometimes there's a change in the living situation and you're not feeling the holiday because there's a change in the living situation. It might not be you, it might be someone else that has a change in their, has transitioned to a different level of care or a different level of living, or has downsized their house and can't do things the way they did before and it upsets the apple cart, right? Or maybe you've changed your residence and you're in a neighborhood where you don't know a lot of people or you're not close to the people that you've spent so many holidays with. There's something about your living situation that changes. And so here's the elephant in the room that we always bring up around the holidays, the idea of the death of someone that you love. And as I said, bless you, it doesn't matter when the death occurred. Like I said, I'm 68 years old now, my mother died when I was 26. So you'd think that's a long time ago. That shouldn't be, hard to believe that's still a factor. But it's not, it doesn't sit with me every single day, I would say, speaking about myself, but it factors in because it's really hard to lose somebody that was like your best friend at a holiday, you know, because that's what my thoughts go to at the holiday is, oh, you know, what would it be like if my mom, she'd be 90 if she was still alive, and what kind of Christmas celebrations would we have if my mom was alive? So I think of that. So it doesn't matter when the death occurred. It can be something that happened a long time ago. It can be something that happened in the last year or two. But still, the holidays evoke, the winter holidays evoke feelings in us that Memorial Day, the 4th of July, and Halloween don't evoke those same feelings for us because it's supposed to be this idea of this most wonderful time of the year. And then the loss of a special relationship. Maybe you had a divorce, maybe you had a separation, maybe you split up from a longtime significant other, maybe you lost your best girlfriend and you aren't speaking, or a guy that you golfed with every year for 20 years, you're just not on good terms anymore. There's some kind of a personal relationship that enters in and makes you think, this just isn't feeling right to me this year. We all have too many pressures in our own lives, and sometimes the pressures really build up, and the closer you get to the holidays, it's that kind of a never-ending circle where everybody's supposed to be happy at the holidays, but you have things that are weighing on your mind for whatever reason, and so it's hard for you to feel good. Then you try and feel better and you think, that's not working, and it's kind of like this circle that just keeps going around and around, and you don't know what to call it. You don't know how to change that feeling because the people around you may be affecting how you're handling your own feelings about the holidays. But we all have pressures. It could be job pressures. It could be that financial pressures are keeping us from celebrating holidays the way we would like. Maybe you can't buy your grandchildren or your kids what they might like, and then you feel bad about it, even though you know your budget doesn't accommodate it. Everybody's been through that at some point. There's so many pressures on us at the holidays. Again, that idea of if you don't put up your Christmas decorations, how does it look in the rest of the neighborhood if your house is dark and everybody else is all lit up? There's so many things. Family distress. How many of you would say that your family, that you have the perfect family holiday at Christmas or Thanksgiving? Oh, lots of laughing. So some years it's wonderful, and you think, this was so good, and you're so relieved. Other years you think, I'm not having them over again for a while. Am I right? I mean, is that something that's happened to you? It's happened to all of us, where you think, I went to all this work, and those ungrateful people didn't even comment on my great casserole, or whatever it was. You know, you cleaned the house, and they made a big mess, and then they left and didn't help you clean up. There's so many things that can impact how you look at the holiday. And that holiday feeling doesn't just happen on December 25th and 6th and then it goes away. You think about it in the summer and you think, I'm not doing it again this way next Christmas, or I'm not doing Thanksgiving the same way, because you don't want to have that discomfort again. So family distress. Sometimes, you know, we think that everybody should come together at the holidays. And if you watch the Hallmark Channel, everybody has an epiphany at Christmas and or Thanksgiving and comes together and is happy at the holidays. And does it really work that way in real life? No. In fact, as a social worker, I've seen that behaviors are even worse sometimes in families that have some distress or fractures going on. The behavior can even be worse because those people who are having just a hard time, they feel that same pressure that you might be feeling. So pretty soon everybody's uncomfortable being there. There's all kinds of books out there that have been written about how to get through the holidays with a distressed family, and some of them are really pretty good. So does anybody have a reason that they would consider sharing about why sometimes you're just not feeling it at the holidays? Barbara?
There's too much food to cook.
Okay.
Honestly, it's so much work to get all the food and buy it and prepare for it. It takes a whole day.
So we're going to talk about in a minute or two how you might change that and still enjoy the holiday but not feel compelled to do that. So you feel compelled to do the cooking, right? This cooking that you do, right?
Well, my daughter's doing it this year.
Okay.
So.
But in past years you felt like you have to
doing it at
contribute.
Christmas, so I'm going to have a huge...
So she knows that's looking in front of her. So not only do you have all that work to do, all those people over, and maybe they don't all get along, it costs a lot of money to go buy food and feed all those people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
it's the time.
And there's a lot of time. Yes?
So I'd have to say, since my husband died, I just don't do Christmas.
Do you go to someone else's home at Christmas time?
No, I run away.
Okay. And that's not unusual.
Pretend like it isn't Christmas.
That's not unusual, actually. So that's not an unusual thing. I appreciate that you shared that. Anybody else have something that you might like to share? Okay. So there's a lot of reasons why you're just not feeling it, so to speak. So what's the end result, though, if we don't feel happy at the holidays? If you don't have this happy, happy, happy thought, if you don't have a Hallmark home, then what happens? Well, people start to say, oh, you must be depressed. So you must be depressed because your husband died. And maybe you are, and maybe you're thinking, I feel pretty good this year. But you're not having a chance to do that because no one gives you a chance. People make an assumption that if you don't appreciate Christmas and Thanksgiving, you must be depressed. That's a pretty common idea that it's too bad that Barbara's so depressed about the holiday. And when really Barbara said, I'm not depressed, I just don't want to cook. You know, it's easier than that. But people make assumptions about things for us. And they want to fix it. So how, in your experiences, how have people tried to fix the holiday so it's happy for you? How have they tried to, has anybody had an experience where someone tried to fix the holiday for you? Yes, sir.
They invite you over to their house.
Yes, so they might invite you over and think, well, we have fun, and you'll go over there. But how does that feel to you sometimes when you go to someone's house where you're not used to being? Strange. That's exactly the word. I've been there. I know a lot of us here have been invited to someone's house by well-meaning friends, people you thought, well, that'll be okay. And then you get there and think, I feel out of place. It feels strange. It doesn't feel right. You think, okay, how soon can I politely go home? Okay, you're agreeing with me there. Julie.
Because I was in that situation for the first time last year where a friend invited me. And initially I said no for Christmas because it was the first one without my mom. Mm-hmm. And the part that's awkward is, and I was there for their Thanksgiving for dessert. I didn't want to be there for the meal. But they're talking their traditions. Remember when Uncle this or so-and-so did that and so forth, and you're not connected to any of that.
Right. Well, that's a good word she just brought up, connected. Even though they're good friends of yours, if they're there with their families, you don't feel that connection. If you're there with a bunch of other people who are friends that you know, you have connections with your friends, right? But you don't have connections, as she said, with other people's family necessarily. So it feels uncomfortable. Thank you for sharing that. It's a very common thing that you experience. Doesn't mean it's right, it's common, but people mean well. They're trying to fix your holiday by inviting you over. So sometimes we can get labeled as being, oh, a Christmas Scrooge. I've been told that before, that I must be kind of Scrooge-like because I wasn't like happy, happy, happy about Christmas necessarily. And I thought, well, I'm not necessarily being a Scrooge. I just would like to just kind of do things the way I would like to do them. Friends feel sorry for us, and if people feel sorry for us, we don't want that. We don't want to go through life thinking people feel sorry for us because we lost somebody, because we got a divorce, because we had to move out of our house, because we lost a job. Whatever it is, we don't want other people typically to feel sorry for us. That just kind of compounds the whole situation when you know somebody's feeling badly for you. You think, I don't want them to feel badly, I just kind of want to get through the day. And sometimes people avoid us if we're not cheerful. If we're not enjoying the holiday, then sometimes you think, oh, they're staying away because they don't want to feel let down in some way. And that just enhances your feelings about the holiday right there. And so we end up feeling isolated. It's hard enough sometimes, especially in the winter in Michigan, it's hard enough sometimes not to feel a little isolated. But you know, sometimes when you think the holidays aren't working for you and people kind of step back because they have their own stuff going on or they don't remember you, or that it just feels more isolating as time goes by. And then we start to feel guilty about things. We feel guilty because we're not cheerful. We feel guilty because we don't want to have our whole family over, or we don't want to light luminarias along our street. So we start to feel a little edgy, a little guilty about doing that, like my guilt about whether or not I should put up my outside lights. So we start to avoid people sometimes. So we all have traditions. Some of you have mentioned the ideas of traditions. And whether you like them or you don't like them, we still have them. And sometimes traditions have to change when things change in our lives. But how easy is it to change a tradition that's gone on in your family that maybe you started years ago? Is it easy to change a tradition if other people enjoy it? No. No, you're shaking your heads. No, it's not easy. And it requires a lot of willpower and a lot of working it through in your head as to why we should change this if you want to change a tradition. Because maybe everybody else thinks it's real fun. You're the only one that doesn't. But altering a tradition is hard to do. And why is it hard to change a tradition? Because you're afraid that if you try and change something, it'll mess up something that other people all like to do. Even though, how many of you in your families, you have old traditions, but how many of you have started newer traditions as the years have gone by? As you added grandchildren or daughter and son-in-laws or things to your family, how many of you have altered or lost a spouse? How many of you have altered traditions in your family? Yeah, quite a number of you. And does it mean that they're bad or good things? They've become part of the picture now too, haven't they? And you've adapted. But making that change the first time is a hard thing to do. Like Barbara's new tradition is no luminaries in her sidewalk. That's her thing. But so she's feeling a little like, well, I haven't said anything yet, but I was successful last year.
Yeah, right.
So I hope you're successful this year too.
This year.
Memories are very strong. Somebody else already mentioned you have memories of ways you celebrated holidays or people being there. And when your memories are very strong, it makes you think, I shouldn't change that because it'll mess up our memories for the future, or it'll change things for our kids or grandkids, when really, they don't really care necessarily always either, but you're all afraid, I found, you're all afraid to talk about it. And when you alter your traditions, it sometimes feels like that's another loss in your life. If you said, well, I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to put up a tree this year because I don't have time, I can't afford it, it's too much work, whatever it is, I'm not feeling well, whatever it is, then it makes you feel like you're messing things up and you're creating another bad thing by not putting up your Christmas tree, when really it should be up to you whether a Christmas tree goes up or not. And then we feel guilty. There's always the opportunity to feel guilty. So grief at the holidays is a challenge. We're going to turn this around in a minute and talk about how we do things differently, but we have to acknowledge the thing in the room is that when you have some form of grief, and it doesn't have to be grief because of a death of a loved one, it can be, like I said, the loss of a relationship, it could be a job change, it could be you moved, could be that your kids for the very first year aren't coming to your house. That's something that can cause some grief in your hearts, right? And so grief is a very big holiday for the challenge, is a very big holiday challenge. And the holidays are not always a joyous time, as we've mentioned, for everybody. And others can make us feel guilty. I remember that when my mom first died, I was very young, obviously, and there were my friends, well-meaning friends. My parents lived in Wisconsin and I lived in Michigan, and so my well-meaning friends would say, well, you have to do this with us. And I'd say, well, why do I have to do that? Because they wanted me to. So why did I go to their houses? Because I felt compelled to go, right? And so I see heads nodding. So many of you have been there and you understand that. If you don't do something that someone else wants you to do, you feel that kind of familiar, I'm a bad person if I don't do that, or I look like a bad person if I don't do what everyone else wants me to do. When really you think, if I stayed home today, watched a movie on Comcast On Demand with a bucket of popcorn, you'd be a really happy person, right? But you feel afraid to do that because someone else is guilting you into making, well-meaning person is making you feel guilty. Grief is a process. You don't just say, well, it's 2 weeks before Christmas, so I'm going to start feeling grief-stricken today. It's a process that you lead up through, you work through, and you work your way through. So you can't just start and stop your grief and feel good on Thanksgiving and Christmas because everybody expects you should. A loss of energy, feeling sad, gives you a loss of energy and can make the whole holiday situation even worse for you. And it's hard to pretend to be cheerful. How many of you have ever tried to do that? Is when you went to your friend's house for a holiday and you weren't quite feeling connected, as we mentioned, how did that make you feel otherwise? Did you think that, did you feel like you were faking having a good time a little bit? Your friends aren't here, you can tell us. Did it make you feel a little bit like you were kind of faking having a good time? Yeah.
You're going there to satisfy him.
Ah, good point. Everybody remember that. They went to satisfy their friends. So it wasn't really something you necessarily thought you really wanted to do. And maybe it was okay for a little while when you first got there, but it gets to be old. It gets to be old. So do you feel like if you're going to someone's house for Christmas or Thanksgiving that you really didn't want to be there? It's not that you don't care about them, it just doesn't feel right to you. Then that gives you another new attack of the guilt. Yes, sir?
You don't want to leave that person's house too early.
Oh yeah, right. That looks.
They might be offended.
Yes, exactly. Oh, that's what I have felt in the past too. Sometimes is if you leave too early, even though you were really not wishing you came, then it looks bad, and then you think, oh gosh, no one's ever going to invite me again. We all go through that, so you're getting the idea here. It's hard to be cheerful when you're not happy, and but it's not an easy thing to acknowledge that the holiday is making you feel sad. For whatever reason, it's hard to acknowledge that because we're constantly bombarded with this idea we should be really happy people. And we should mention that what does it mean to be depressed? Some people say I'm really depressed when really they're not. That's not really depression, it's just a feeling of sadness, not the same thing. So a few signs and symptoms, just so you know, being depressed not only affects your mind and the idea that you know you're depressed, but it kind of hits your heart and your soul, and it can make your body feel tired. It can hit you a meaning that you can feel tired or just kind of under the weather or just loss of energy from being depressed. Depression is very common in people, not only older adults, but in anybody. It can be common, but I just want to make sure I say as a social worker that depression is not a normal part of aging for anybody. I have heard too many people tell me, well, you know, she turned 85, so we would expect her to be depressed, and I go, why? That has nothing to do with it. Depression is not a normal part of aging, and I teach in the Aging Studies program at Eastern, and we go over and over and over and over this with the students, and they're like, wow, I never knew that. They felt like you should feel sad because you're getting older. No, those two things do not go together. Depression can be treated. Sometimes we don't realize we're depressed or feeling sad because you're kind of just going along with the flow. You got a job, you got kids around, you're cooking, you're doing stuff to get ready for the holidays, and you don't realize that they're hurting you. But depression is a genuine problem. And here's a few symptoms. I don't want to dwell on them because I think some of you know this, but and you do have a handout, but there are real symptoms of depression that I want you to be aware of. And they make common sense to you. Some people say, well, I stop eating when I'm depressed. I wish that happened to me. I am just the opposite. If I'm having a little bout of depression, then I could find myself probably at Wendy's having a burger and fries. But depression strikes different people in different ways. Some people overeat, some people undereat. Some people sleep more when they're depressed, some people sleep less when they're depressed. So there's no typical person who is a depressed personality. And it's part of my job as a social worker to be able to diagnose depression. So I've come to learn over the years that it looks different on everybody. And feeling overwhelmed when you weren't before, like if Christmas didn't bother you last year and this year it is, it's time to think about why is that happening to you and look at some of the reasons. And we won't dwell on that. One of the things is also wanting to be alone. And people say, well, you don't, like maybe when your husband died, you might have said you wanted to be alone. And friends said, oh no, you can't be alone, you should be with us. And then you thought to yourself, why? Why should I have to be with you? Maybe I just want to be alone. But being alone all the time is not helpful for someone who's depressed. Having depression, and it's hard to say you're feeling depressed because people are embarrassed to say they're depressed. We have people of much varying age levels here in our audience, and for some of you younger people who are busy working, have big families, go to soccer games, do stuff, to actually acknowledge that you feel depressed is really hard to do because you have other people have an expectation of you and you have an expectation of yourself. So it's hard to say, I think I'm depressed. The National Institute of Mental Health reports that 19 million adults American adults suffer from depression each year. That's a pretty big number if you think about it, and actually the number's probably bigger than that. Those are just people who have actually admitted it, who have come forward and asked for help. So maybe I'm depressed, what can I do? Especially at the holiday times. So tell somebody that you trust that you're feeling sad. Tell somebody that you think you're depressed. Because if you just keep it to yourself, it's kind of like it's just going around and around inside of you, and there's not an opportunity to move it or do anything differently. So tell somebody you trust. Tell your physician if you're feeling depressed, because there's so many things that are wonderful, medications and so forth, that you maybe only do for a short time that turn that feeling around for you. And share it with somebody that you're comfortable with. Do something that's a little out of your comfort zone to just get you off the spot that you're on. Sometimes the senior center is a good start. So what could be wrong with feeling better? That's what I always like to say. And let's turn around now and go back to the holiday thing. So how are you going to get through the holidays this year and feel more successful at it? How is this going to be a holiday that you're going to appreciate potentially? So if others offer to help you, like you're entertaining all these people at your house, Barbara, and you're thinking, I don't really want to cook all that. So if people offer to help, what's wrong with saying yes? You do? Okay, so she does. How many of you have a hard time saying yes to having someone help you?
No, I can suggest, why don't you bring bacon?
Oh, she's good. She
Because I
brings
know
it
that
up.
you make a good,
So sometimes it's hard to ask for help because you feel like, well, I did this all before or the year before, why shouldn't I do it? Or you don't like other people coming in your kitchen, or you're afraid the food's not going to be up to your standards. There's all kinds of reasons why we don't want people to help. Maybe someone says, hey, I'll come over and help you put up your tree. Well, they're not going to put it up just like I do. We can all talk ourselves in and out of things, but we have to remember that we want to do things with people that will help us feel better as well as them. So delegate, which you said you offered, you asked people to bring things. Don't write holiday cards. Every year I say to myself, okay, I'm not going to do Christmas cards this year. Every year I end up doing them, but I talk about it with myself and say, maybe I'm not going to do that. Don't do something that you think you can let go of that makes you feel fatigued or saps you of some of your energy. Let it go. Maybe you do decorate your fern this year and don't put up a big Christmas tree because having the Christmas lights on the fern makes you feel okay. And it's not as big as putting up the whole tree is. Do something special for yourself. This is really hard for us to do when you're busy at Christmas and maybe your finances aren't as strong as they are at other times of the year. See a movie with someone whose company you enjoy. Is there any rules that say that right leading up to Christmas, instead of going to a party, you can't say to a friend, hey, would you like to go to a movie and do something? There's no rules about it, but we feel bad if we stray. Take time to read a book or watch a favorite movie. Buy yourself something you've really wanted that fits the budget. So I'm not saying, go out and shop for yourself for Christmas, but if there's something you've wanted that you know would give you pleasure, then do that for yourself, because if it gives you pleasure, that might even make you feel better for a short period of time. Decide who you're going to spend your time with. What invitations do you want to accept, and what invitations do you say, I really don't want to do that because I don't feel as comfortable at their houses. I might somewhere else. So decide who you're going to spend your time with. And embrace memories. It doesn't help to push all your good memories away. It doesn't help to push all your good memories or those traditions away. You have to think them through and say, okay, these were good times. Dwelling on them nonstop is another thing, but letting them be part of your day and say, that was a good year that we spent doing that. Or as you said, listening to a family talk about their good times. You can do it for a short period of time, but do you want to do that every Christmas? Probably not. Limit your use of alcohol, caffeine, rich food, sweets. You can't eat or drink your feelings away, especially with the alcohol. It's easy for us to go to someone's party and have a couple drinks or drink some punch or whatever it is they're having. But I can tell you, alcohol is a depressant. It is not something that clears your head and makes everything feel better. A Christmas drink, a glass of wine, whatever it is always a nice social thing, and you enjoy a glass of wine. Nobody's saying you shouldn't do it. But drinking too much at the holidays only brings back those feelings of being morose or not cheerful. It does not enhance your holiday. It does not, I can tell you that. And going home thinking, I'm going to throw up because I ate too much stuff, that doesn't enhance your holiday either. So make yourself some new traditions. By new traditions, maybe you invite someone over to your house, or maybe you do something differently. excuse me, than you've ever done before. So set a tradition, excuse me. Set a tradition that you think you can actually go through with another year. If you are able to do something a couple years in a row, it becomes special to you or your family, and it becomes a new tradition. There's nothing wrong with old traditions, but there's nothing wrong with new ones either. Don't set yourself up for failure at Christmas time by inviting too many people over, or going to a house of somebody you don't really know anyone there and you don't want to go, or over decorating, or whatever it is. Don't set yourself up for failure this year. Do things that fit for you, and only you know what that's going to be. I can't tell you what to do. Only you know what really is going to make you feel better. And if you need a little time to cry this Christmas because you're just frustrated or tired or you've had a loss in your life, then that's okay to do too. Find small things. When you do something that's funny, even if you go to a movie that was an entertaining movie, those endorphins, that's a chemical in our brains, that's our feel-good hormone that's in everybody's brain, and when you laugh, the endorphins get a big rush, and it makes you feel better. That's why if you go to a really funny movie and you come home and you think, well, the plot was pretty stupid, but I laughed out loud for an hour, that's because all those endorphins are running around in your head making you feel better. Consider strengthening ties with religious community, or, on the other hand, this is hard for people to do. Sometimes you have to loosen your ties with religious community. I'm not advocating anybody not go to church on Christmas. As Christians, this is a big time of the year for us, and for some people it feels really good to be in church on Christmas, and for other people it compounds some of their sad feelings. So maybe if you've had too much of a tight rein with your religious community, your faith community, sometimes backing off a little bit sometimes helps you get through the holidays better. Meet a friend for coffee, or have lunch with somebody. I always like telling people who are having a challenging time to have lunch, because what's the good thing about having lunch with somebody? It's just the two of you, and you talk, but what about the time? It's time limited. If you go to lunch with somebody, you're not going to go for the whole day. It doesn't feel like you have to go to a party and be perky with maybe people that you don't know real well. When you sit down and have lunch with somebody, it's usually, what, an hour or so? Yeah. You can do anything for an hour. Yeah. So I'm an advocate for, with people I've worked with, of saying lunch is a really good thing to do because there's a time limit to it. And you know it's going to end, and you can have a nice visit for an hour, and then you say, that went pretty well. That worked out. Focus less on the idea of this is a holiday, and focus more on the idea of catching up and enjoying each other's company. Instead of thinking it has to be this big ordeal of holidays, think about it, well, I'll be happy to see my cousin Myra because I haven't seen her in a year and we can catch up a little bit. That's a good thing to do, to focus on. Enjoy holiday lights. I've done this since I was a little kid. My father used to drive us around. On my way home from school or whatever I'm doing, I just will say, well, look at that house. That neighborhood looks all lit up. And I'll just drive up and down the streets and look at their holiday lights. That always makes me feel much better. Light a special candle to celebrate someone that you love and might have lost around the holiday, and order Chinese food on Christmas Day. I worked at Jewish Family Services for 2 years, and of course they don't celebrate Christmas, most of them, and that's a big deal. That's why all the Chinese restaurants are always open on Christmas Day, because we have a large population of Jewish people, observant Jewish people in Ann Arbor, and that's their big thing, that's their tradition. They order Chinese food. Well, just because you're Lutheran or whatever denomination you are, does that mean you can't order Chinese food and not worry about it? No. Peter.
What do the Jews do on Hanukkah? Hanukkah didn't even exist until I was a kid. You know, I guess
it's an eating holiday for them now. Eatings and presents, kind of like our Christmas.
They have to rescue an otherwise very obscure holiday in the tradition.
Right.
Around that time, if they dragged it up and said, okay, so we're going to do it.
We're going to do Hanukkah. So experts say, muster up your inner strength. It's in there. You do have a lot of inner strength that you can pull through at Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that, remember, and I learned this when I was very young, that even when I was feeling really sad the first, second, third year after my mom died, I found that there was like an hour where I had a really good time with someone or something. And then one year I said, gosh, this was like a good half day. So you pull things together and you find bits of joy, I like to call it, even when it's a hard time. You can find a bit of joy. And remember, as the author Mary Oliver said in the beginning of this talk, it's all in the way you embrace it, balance it, and carry it. And that's how Christmas and Thanksgiving holidays, I hope, can go for you as well. So, does anybody have a question or a comment you would like to make about anything that we
And a young friend gave me a bag of books, and she said, Elijah, if any of these are right, fine, but if not, know they're a gift of love.
Aww.
And I thought, that's a good way to look at it, because the person too who's inviting you to their home, and you don't feel like it, just know it's a gift of love. Whether
Wow.
you take it or can use it or not.
Right, but that made you feel good just when you accepted it, didn't it?
A good reminder that the thought behind it.
Right, it's the thought. Sometimes, we all say that, oh, it's the thought that counts, and it starts to sound so mediocre, but it's really a true thing. Sometimes that it is the
She
thought.
recognized that maybe it wouldn't be right, and I could just put it aside.
Right, and pick it up when you wanted to.
Yeah.
That was a good gift. Anybody else have a comment or a question? Anything you'd like to comment before we are through? All right, very good. Well, thank you. Yes, sir.
You didn't say very much about either exercise or spending time on the computer or watching TV, because as far as I know, those two things have a rather big influence on your mood.
Well, that's okay. So for you personally, what do those three things do for your mood?
Exercise improves my mood.
Good, okay. How about television and computer work, though?
The studies say that that's not good for mood.
It's not. And, well, television can or can't be. It depends on what you're watching. Computer work feels tedious. And even if you're, we hear enough about getting off our phones and getting off our computers that we know. Now, exercise is a thing if that's part of your normal events. Because once again, aerobic exercise of any kind, even taking a walk around the block, gets those endorphins in our brains going again, and it may make you feel good. And even if it makes you feel good for an hour or two, isn't an hour or two better than no time at all? So yes, exercise, I'm sorry, I should add that when I do this talk again, is the idea that exercise can help, but I don't want anybody to feel any more stressed and think, well, I have to go out and exercise in order to feel better. I don't want to add anything more to your menu of things that already kind of bring you down. But you are absolutely right that exercise in any form can really increase those endorphins. Julie?
Well, one thought that's going through my head is like the last Thanksgiving we had with my mom. After we finished the meal, we all went into my aunt and uncle's family room. I think there were 10 of us. And of course, a game was put on because Michael wants to watch that. And all of a sudden, I thought, what is going on in this room? Out of 10 people, 6 were on their cell phones.
Oh.
And I turned to I think Hannah at that time was probably 12, 13. And I said, Hannah, you're smiling. What are you smiling about? She said, oh, I'm just texting my mom, who's sitting right there on the couch. Oh. And I looked at my mom, and I said, are you ready to go? And my mom said, whenever you are. I got up and went and got her coats, came in. My aunt looked like, what the heck's going on? And I thought, if they're not going to engage us, because my mother, myself, my uncle, and then my cousin Molly's husband, Christopher, only 4 of us were not on cell phones. Everybody else was texting, and I think what was hard about it was they were figuring out the stores they were going to go shopping. And my mom was living at the time, it was called Selene Evangelical Home, it's now EHM Senior Solutions, and she was a Medicaid resident. She didn't have money to buy Christmas for me.
So that was felt all wrong on multiple levels.
Yeah, they were distracted and
on multiple levels. So that was their idea of a Thanksgiving tradition, was talking to each other on their phones or texting instead of just having a real conversation. And that's one of the things that I like about lunch, when somebody said about talking, is that if you go to lunch with somebody, you put your phone away, and then you just have a nice conversation with that person, and you can look at each other comfortably for an hour and enjoy that time, instead of thinking I have to be doing something else. So that one-on-one, that's kind of a gift of love, as you were saying, to each other, to sit down for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever it is, and just focus on each other, and not focus on any other thing that's going on around you. Resist the urge to say, well, I got to get to Myers now and do something. Yeah.
You know, somehow, being on the cell phone has turned into something hip. You know, I'm cool. We need to somehow turn the script.
Well, that's like my aunt.
That's a nerdy thing to do, right? When you're in a room with 10 people and you pick up your phone, that's what the nerds do.
She's in with her friend.
It's what we've done. We have to let you go to get you off to your services and whatever else you're going to do.
Magic hour has risen for that ancient clock is on the
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that all of you came, and I appreciate you participated. But if I can do anything for you, Peter and Ron Delph have my email address and my phone number. Feel free.